Fanfiction is an act of wish fulfillment. It's also a way to fill empty spaces, things that we miss in between the commercials or in between seasons or in between books. It's sometimes to Mary Sue ourselves into a world that we love and hang out with the characters who feel like friends. But it's also come to serve a deeper and more meaningful role for people who feel marginalized by society. We can take these characters in these familiar settings and I lost my place. And create the world that we want to live in. We form relationships, perhaps not intended by the creators, unless they're queer baiting, but that's a whole other panel. But ones that look like relationships we want to see, unrestrained by gender, sexuality, or race, to name a few. Taking Spock and Kirk and making them lovers helps us normalize feelings we have that peers, family, or society may have made us feel are wrong or something to be hidden. We can use these settings to create safe spaces for ourselves and by so doing extend them to others. So on our panel today, I'll start from the end, is Crystal. Crystal is an anomaly, according to her peers, in that she's a lesbian that has been obsessed with male-male slashing since high school. She thinks it makes perfect sense that Steve and Tony are soulmates, but Sephiroth, did I say it right? Thank you. Shouldn't be slashed with anyone. Give her 10 minutes.
Do you have any other,
Give her 10 minutes and she can work out an argument for or against any pairing ever. Hansi Oppenheimer is a filmmaker fangirl working on a documentary about women and fandom called Squee. Kendra is an entertainment writer and blogger based out of New York with bylines at Lenny Letter, Cosmo, Elle, ESPN, The Daily Beast, and The Toast. She is the author of the only Ugly Betty and Batman crossover fanfic on the internet. She's obviously our star. Frenchie Rodriguez. I don't have for real, because he's on the other one. No, I don't have for real intro.
Hand me one of those, please. Darling.
Because this is boring. You don't want to hear it.
That's the boring one. This is the fun one.
That we wrote for her, by the way.
Yeah.
Frenchie Rodriguez is the co-founder and contributing editor of On Wednesdays We Wear Capes. She wears her fannable heart on her sleeve, well, on her skin, if we're being literal.
Ask her nicely, maybe she'll show it to you.
Yes. And will preach the good word of Omegaverse wherever, whenever. Julie Hegner is the co-founder and contributing editor of On Wednesdays We Wear Capes. She spends a lot of time reading good fanfic and even more time writing bad fanfic. She is currently trapped in an endless cycle of severus Snape gifts. And I'm Nancy, and I spend far too much time managing a bookstore and far too little time reading fan fiction. But if you slip me some steric fic, I'll disappear under my desk for hours. So what we're going to start with is...
You have a screen.
Oh, I have a screen. I'm excited.
There's this fantastic picture that Flamecon gave us.
What we're going to start with is I would like each of you to explain what brought you to fan fiction, and where you found it. Like what was the mode that you found it in?
Okay, I'm Crystal. I think I'm the only one on this panel who's had their beginnings in anime and manga back when I was in high school. Yeah, so for me it was, Gundam Wing, all those numbers that I didn't understand back then. Yeah. But now, I get it. And I was role-playing on AOL, like those old-ass AOL chat rooms, and from role-play came fan fiction.
I started looking into it as a subject of a documentary on fan fiction and found for the most part no one wanted to talk about it on camera. This was in 2012. Well, except for the Harry Potter people. They were all like, yeah, sure, we want that. And so, down that rabbit hole. And I decided not to make the film about just that, because I wasn't the person to make that film, but so I ended up doing a film about women and transformative media and all the various ways they do that, whether it's fan art or fanfic. But I think it's such a punk rock act.
I'm Kendra. I started writing fanfiction basically because I would just like create black girls and like put them in like different settings. So I would write really bad Harry Potter fanfiction. I was on fanfiction.net in 1999. I was 11. I should not have been. That stuff is still online because I don't believe in deleting things from the internet. It's hidden deep. But so yeah, I started writing Harry Potter fanfiction, and it just kind of evolved from there. I ended up writing a 100,000 word story about myself and Orlando Bloom at one point. I was like 13 at that point, and I grew up pretty sheltered in terms of like sex ed and that sort of thing. So fanfiction is really like where I started like teaching myself about sex and sex ed, and where I got like that sort of fulfillment because I went to boarding school and didn't date.
I'm Frenchie, and how I came to fanfic was back in the dark days of LiveJournal, which also still exists. It also started for me with roleplay, and from there, I mean, we did such extensive roleplay that it became fic in and of itself, original fic, so to speak.
I feel like just to add something, it wasn't like a post.
Yeah, no,
it was fucking like paragraph.
And then you had to start another post because it just got too long. And from there, you know, all of a sudden there was fanfiction.net, and it was like, woo! And then came the strike through. And everything, the Russians came, and then everything got obliterated. And at that point, I mean, I was probably writing fanfic earlier than that, but it was on a typewriter. We won't talk about how old I am. And so now, I have the internet.
I am older than her. My fanfiction, my earliest fanfiction, my best friend and I started writing it in computer class in high school. It was the story of us and Def Leppard. The first 20 pages of it are typed, and then we got bored with having to print it out and our computer teacher asking us what the hell we were doing. So the next 80 pages of it are handwritten on loose leaf.
I've read excerpts.
When I got to college, I started doing Titanic fanfic. You know, putting yourself in the story. Yeah. There's no shame. No shame.
I don't know why you would want to put yourself in that story.
And then I migrated to fanfiction.net with some Lone Gunman fanfic that are still there. If you go looking, there aren't that many of them, so you will quickly find out who I am, even though I have a surname. It is not /Lone Gunman. It is actually, I think I've actually written the only Lone Gunman fanfic featuring Blue's Clues. I was in college.
If you want /Lone Gunman, I'm sure she can find it for you.
I can write it now.
So, history-wise, recently we've discovered that there was an Aaron Burr fanfiction. Someone who decided that...
Represent Hamilton.
And Kendra has pointed out that there were dime store novels around the turn of the century where, you know, we could talk about Jesse James as an anti-hero and inject ourselves into that and rewrite history so the South could rise again. But it didn't really get exciting until the Star Trek fanzine. and we wonder, we all ask ourselves about Slash, and why does Crystal like reading about two men having
That's why I'm here, is to
It
be
is.
a part of the slides.
Yeah, it is. That's literally.
Yeah.
So, I guess all of you have read Slash, enjoy Slash, write Slash. Where does that come from inside you? Like, what brought you, what attracted you to it?
There's more than one penis. And if I'm in the mood for a penis. Yeah, mathematically. And also, especially if you're into anything rougher, like if you're into BDSM or anything like that, you can, men can get a bit more rougher with each other with believable injuries. Okay, I mean, granted, I will read some, Ponfar fic in a minute between Spock and Uhura, okay? But, if it is guy on guy, like, it can get a bit more verging on Klingon. So.
So for me, this question always came up throughout high school. I was coming out, everyone's like, well, like, if you're dating women or with women, why are you into two guys doing it? And I guess for me, like that's right. Thanks. And I guess for me, it's really more of a power situation. I feel like the dynamics, especially back when I was first discovering my sexuality, the thought of two men who I'd always seen as being more threatening to me in some way, there's just a different power dynamic when there's two men involved with each other. So I feel like it was satisfying for me, not only because there's two penises, which this is great.
It isn't what you're there for.
Right. It was a way to explore different characters that wasn't about, solely about, this hierarchy of gender and all the issues that come with that, potentially. So, but yeah, that's, I'm on the slide.
Can we just quickly piggyback on that? That if you are someone who, like me, is genderqueer, even though for the most part I'm presenting, I always envisioned myself into not only the more dominant role, but always a dominant masculine role, and having two guys together was like, I could kind of pick and choose which one I was in that particular equation.
Yeah. I came to Slash pretty late, not really until Teen Wolf. But that was when I was really like, oh, Stark, I'm gonna do this. And it was like, for me, I'm probably the straightest one on this. Yeah, but so for me, it was like really purely based on looks. It's like hot. It was two hot men going at it with each other, and part of it was the power dynamic. Part of it was being able, especially with Teen Wolf, it was very alpha, beta, always. That's just kind of how that pairing is structured. And so it was just really interesting. It was opening up a world that I personally am not part of, and so it's the opportunity to learn and escape, and that's kind of why I ventured in there, and the fact that Tyler Kaplan is beautiful.
I think as a writer, just it opens up so many different things to explore.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to piggyback off of what Kendra just said because I came to it with Torchwood. And I defy you to watch John Barrowman make out with anybody, but especially those Captain Jack Yonto scenes, and not be like, God damn, I want to get some of that.
I prefer him with Captain Picard.
Yeah, that's also, let's all slash in this Torchwood.
So going from there, there's more extreme areas, and particularly in Japanese fandom, we sort of find this whole other level.
oh, you put Sephiroth on there.
I did. there's something for everyone in this life. But bringing the Western and the Japanese together also leads us to Omegaverse.
Oh, hey.
Hey. And all the fun things in between. So I guess we talk a little bit about those two different takes on fandom.
So for me, I grew up in a household that didn't really talk about David Bowie. So yeah,
That's abuse.
yeah, I know. So I feel like my first introduction to androgyny was Visual K. Tyrone Gray, Gagged. Yeah, you're not, you get it. So I think as far as kind of opening the door to seeing just different expressions of gender, different expressions of just, one's inner personality, Japan really kind of bumped it up for me that American media just never seemed to do when I was in high school. And then as it bled into watching anime and manga, there's so many subjects that anime and manga cover that just don't exist in Western media. Whether it's, I was talking to someone outside, there's a manga about like a 500-year-old angel that like hits off with like a 15-year-old, and there's like angels and like, you know.
Here for it.
I've read that fic.
Yeah. So it's like whatever you're into, there's probably a manga based off of it, and then there's of course fan fiction based off of it. So I think my beginnings really cemented there, and now to see it flourishing in Western media, it's a really cool thing for the two fandoms to kind of coagulate.
That's hilarious, because I spent all of middle school pretending to like anime, so that my friends would like me.
True confessions.
Yeah.
Which is, it's funny though, because in sort of like the geekosphere, you have, it's fringe on its own, but then once you're in it, like, you're afraid of violating what's already in the fringe. So you have to, amongst the geeks, you have to like, you feel like you have
Yes.
to
Because
certain
there's
things.
hentai and there's different types of hentai, but then like Omegaverse is its own thing, but then they kind of like have the same
Yeah,
aspects.
but
So
I feel like a lot of anime and manga kind of goes off the rails very quickly in the same way that Omegaverse tends to. And it's not for the faint of heart, especially if there's MPreg involved. People get squicked very easily. And give not a single fuck. I'm here for it. You know, and I think that's kind of where they parallel. Anime and manga is not for everybody, because you can start out reading something that seems really innocent and all of a sudden tentacles. So with Omegaverse.
Like, that's like the amazing thing about fanfiction in general. It's like very much sort of like a buffet of like as it is. It's like you can go as far as you want to, and like I personally stop at MPreg, but like it's out there for anyone who wants it, and it's a very yes.
Yeah. Just like VeggieTales fanfic. I mean,
Right.
I've also read that.
But actually, I feel like the really cool thing about, so I read a lot of Boy Meets World fanfiction because Boy Meets World was like a very like guiding part of my childhood. But the key word there is childhood. So like my Boy Meets World fanfiction that I was writing as a child was very different from what I read as an adult. And fanfiction like really allows you to, or a source material that is made for one age group, it really allows it to evolve and for you to keep enjoying it as your interests mature. So that's what I like. I'm a 28-year-old woman who watches Girl Meets World in earnest.
Yeah.
And so like I will read Girl Meets World fanfiction feeling good knowing that the 12-year-olds who the show is made for are not enjoying the fanfiction that I'm enjoying. And it like really creates like this good sort of line and space between things where I know it's serving the audience that it's meant to serve, but I can still enjoy it in my own way, which is one of the things I really appreciate about fanfiction.
But I think it goes back to sort of like the birth of fanfic and how valuable it is for marginalized communities, because we don't see ourselves in the media that we get, so we have to put ourselves there. And for instance, you know, like, we're perfectly aware that the majority of the things we focus on tend to be what we call pale and male. And the reason that is because that's what we're given. So oftentimes what we'll do is we'll take that source material and we'll gender bend or we'll race bend, or we'll change the characters from, you know, being heterosexual to being asexual. Anyway, like, it started out with women doing the wish fulfillment, like A. Burr, his fanfic, and then it went.
It's juicy, read it.
It is.
She live tweeted it.
In 1800s talk, it's sex on the stick.
It is. And I think that after that, it became, you know, with Star Trek, it became where people could explore different genders and different races in media that wasn't given to them. And from there, we came here. Now it's a whole other kettle of fish.
And I also feel like
Sorry, Crystal has the link.
Oh,
no, I'm just here for it.
going back to you can discover things. By way of Harry Potter, I have gone down the BDSM rabbit hole because you start on something innocently enough, and it's like Snemayan, my OTP. And then the next thing you know, you didn't read the tags, and there's figging, anal sex, enemas, candle play, and I was like, holy shit, here for all of this. I had no idea. It's like a whole other level, but it brought me.
It's like something what you were saying. I feel like a lot of stuff that I learned was just from fanfic and those tags. I'm like, yeah, I want to know more about that thing. So, let me see what my fellow writers were writing about insert thing that I don't really know about.
Insert thing in there.
Yeah.
Insert thing.
What about, going along with what you were saying, talking about how sometimes the source material becomes far less satisfying than the fic. So, and how does that, how does that work? Like,
Yes.
we're there for that. But, it's not just Teen Wolf, it's Ghostbusters, the new Ghostbusters movie. There was things in
Can
that.
we talk about Holtz?
Yes.
I have not seen this movie. Go for it.
Oh my god. Okay, so at first, I saw Ghostbusters with my 9-year-old goddaughter, who was very excited about things for a different reason. And it was great to see her really into it, but I'm like, why is Holtz coming on to everybody and I don't get anything at the end? And I thought it was queerbaiting, and then Frenchie pointed me to an article.
Oh yeah, about how the creator is intended for her to be either, actually no, not even bi, lesbian or pansexual. But because the studio, they couldn't be open about that, so in terms of the studio, they would see it as queerbaiting, but like the dude did it on purpose.
Yeah.
He wanted people to clearly see that Holtz was interested in other women and not in Kevin. So,
And then I started going to AO3. And
like you do.
Like you do when you're like, I need more of this. And while there's not enough. So any of you who write, get out there. Mama needs some sugar.
Because Holtz and Patty. Thank
Yes, that's why that is there.
Thank you.
How many of us? I mean, come on. I know there's.
Not seen this movie.
But growing from it,
Yeah, I mean, Teen Wolf went through that problem in that I stopped watching after Derek left, because it was real unsatisfying. But, I mean, I'm personally of the opinion that if I start watching a show, I have generally started watching the show because of what the creator has created and like what he has given me. And so I generally actually don't want the source material to change based on what fandom is doing. I'm kind of against that. I feel like you've given me this thing, you're the creative voice, you should be able to direct it. In some cases, like when you get to queer dating, that can sort of change. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that.
When they're deliberately changing things to drive an audience to them,
Right.
knowing that they don't plan on fulfilling any of that. It's, yeah. Well, that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one thing to change the source material based on what the fans want. It's another thing to see what the fans want and hint at them actually getting that, and then saying, haha, no. That's like what happened on the 100 with Plexa, and that's.
It's almost
people on a ship.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I was gonna bring up Supernatural because it's like almost an invasion of the safe space that fanfiction creates. Like Eric Kripke, he had planned Supernatural to go for 5 seasons, and that show is actually a perfect 5-season show in my opinion. It's like that storyline is amazing. He clearly knew what he was doing.
The other seasons.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry. There are some good seasons after that, but what I'm saying.
Or within the panel.
Yes. What I'm saying is that those 5 seasons are like perfect television. Not perfect, but very near so. So you can tell though when he starts reading fan fiction, and he's talked about in interviews that he reads fan fiction and reads the fan boards, and I'm not so sure how I feel about that. How I feel about that interaction of creator and fandom and like what that means. Like I don't love when someone like Graham Norton gets on his show and reads like fanfiction to Benedict Cumberbatch. Like whether it's NC-17 or whether it's even just like generalization because I feel like the community is really supposed to be so insular and so safe.
Well, I think that's different because he's using it as a weapon, clearly. He's using, it's a violation of the fans, it's also a violation of the actor or singer, whoever the object of affection is. It's a violation all the way around and it's disgusting, so no.
And it's not like what we just saw, I don't know how many were at the opening ceremony, with that fantastic fan fiction read. Brilliant. That was lovingly done. We all were enjoying that. It wasn't like a weapon, it was like, who hasn't written this? At some point in their life.
We weren't the butt of the joke.
Yeah. So it was like we were all together, as opposed to, I'm just going to aim this at you.
And also, actually, talking about outgrowing the source material and bringing it back to Omegaverse, it all comes back to Omegaverse. Just in general, Omegaverse has become a completely separate thing. So it doesn't matter what fandom you're in, there will be Omegaverse. It's just, it's you can do original fic Omegaverse and people will read it.
Y'all know what a Megaverse is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. No?
Okay. Here's the sweet summer child.
It's okay, because I didn't know until I started hanging out with her, and now my world is...
Me either.
I just want to make sure... Explain.
Oh, Jesus.
In a capsule.
Okay, alright, take alpha, beta, omega dynamics, put them on humans, it's very animalistic. People, there's a lot of non-concept concept that's good, so you do not read it. Also, a lot of people happen to use that as a way to deal with their own past traumas, so if that sounds like something you might be into, you might want to read that as well. But yeah, it's very much, it's a clear hierarchy. So there's someone always in control, there's always someone who's dominant, and there's always someone who's submissive. And then there's the betas who are kind of in between and no one loves them. So, and also, Omegaverse has its own rules, base rules, and yet everyone knows them who's in the fandom, but everyone freely changes them. So it's kind of like with vampires. We all know the base rules of vampires, but sometimes people will change them and make them...
Sometimes they get sparkly.
But we know what they change. It's not like, you know, our own canon changes at all.
Right, so it's a base set of rules that are
Yeah,
complex.
there's nodding. So like if you like it's like I'm trying to dance around it, but like real talk, there's nodding.
Well, I mean, you also might want to explain what M-Preg is.
Oh, M-Preg is where men are able to bear children.
And sometimes go into heat is a preparation for...
Yeah, because again, animalistic sex, clearly Frenchie has a bias. But yeah, that's what you get if you check out.
Next slide.
Oh my god.
Oh, yeah, but now we get to animals.
Oh,
Where the fandoms and the shows inform each other, which Kendra is not a huge fan of, but, you know, it happens, and what are the positives and negatives on that?
It depends. It depends on who's doing it. It depends on if you are, you know, like.
Brian Fuller genius.
Yes. It depends, like, you know, if you're someone like V Fools who actually grew up. Right, that's his name.
You guys know you've got the crowns.
She has a picture of him, like, at her crotch, because she's got blood splattered
She was wearing
pants.
black milk leggings with the blood splatters.
Yeah,
and
he
was
fell
like,
in love with them. So this is a relationship we just accept.
But like, if you have someone like that who basically grew up writing Star Trek fanfic and then grew up to write official Star Trek fanfic, because that's what all, you know, sequels, etc. Reboots are. They're fanfic, and a lot of creators, because they're changing it in some way, they won't cop to that. Brian Fuller is like, no, I write fanfic. So, and he enjoys the fact that his audience also writes fanfic and grows with him, but yet he doesn't take material from the fandom. He just sees where they're coming from, and if the chemistry between the actors or the storyline seems to make sense, like, I mean, he's one of us. That's the thing. He's one of us, so he doesn't take from us, but
He's almost using the fans as a barometer.
exactly, and he
Like,
comes
this
to the
is like
same
8%.
conclusions as we do. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's sort of like a micro version of the way, I mean, television and media, because we're in America, we don't really have our own mythology, like that's religious based, we don't have Greek gods and that sort of thing. So we create our own pop culture, and as a whole, sort of the way that we view our mythology, which is television, it's shaped by, you know, the temperature sort of the culture. You see it like with the depictions of, take Superman.
I would argue that our
Yeah.
mythology
Is
super
yeah.
clear.
And so the way that these characters are depicted really changes based on sort of the populace as what's going on. Like, there's a reason why you have a Superman right now who kills people. Like, there literally is. Like, the temperature of the country at the time that that movie was made was such that that is what you got. It was like kind of, we're being, you know, attacked. The sort of, what am I looking for? The, you know, it's a Trump world, basically.
The
So there- yeah.
aliens, however you want to read that, are attacking.
Exactly. I mean, there's a reason you got that third Nolan Batman movie, which was like such this fear of the poor rising up against the wealthy, against the 1%. So it's sort of the reading the barometer and recreating these characters as fan fiction. Sorry, I was just like jumping.
No,
Yeah.
it's because they're not stealing from, you know, fanfic creators who are writing about a Superman or a Batman who is that way.
Right.
It's because they're living in the same world that we are, and they're coming again to the same conclusions, and so that's the media that they're producing as compared to, you know, what was going on in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yeah.
It's really cool to get to meet with, for instance, comic artists and to know that they're us, basically. If you guys read 1872, it was like, yeah. Marvel did this little one-shot. Yeah. It was like a, long story short, like a one-shot of like Western-style Marvel characters. So Steve was sheriff, Tony was like the drunken loser that would like stumble around.
Accurate.
Yeah. Love him. So I met a comic artist at New York Comic Con last year, and there were some panels where I was like, you know, I like this panel a lot because there's like this chemistry happening here, and I tried to make it like as on the down low as I could because I don't want to be that crazy like I love Slash. And so, long story short, she sort of drew these panels with like the Slash in mind because she's totally into Slash, and she ships Steve and Tony. And Chris Anka, you know, drawing for Marvel right now, he's drawing Steve and Tony in little panels of them like dancing together, and people like me notice that and cry. So it's cool to know that people like Brian or like Nick or Chris are in, you know, they're here, but they're like us, and they're not catering to us, but they're kind of just like going along with it, you know, with us, basically. Yeah.
Like they've created a fandom, and they're also part of the fandom, which is something that never used to happen. Like, fandom was completely separate, and it's different if you can acknowledge the fandom, which is great, but it's different to acknowledge them, and it's another thing to actually be a part of it, and to be as stoked over the takes on your characters as, you know, as your fans are.
And the access to creators is much
Oh,
different.
yeah.
I mean, you know, you can interact with them all the time online, pretty much.
Yeah.
So I think that changes things too.
It's kind of like Broadway. You have some actors who prefer Broadway to screen because you feed off the energy that the audience gives you, and I think that things such as Twitter, not Facebook now, strictly Twitter, that live interaction, while it can open the doors to a couple of not so savory folks, it's also seeing people react to your creations in real time, and I think that drives people. It's kind of like the comment section on AO3.
So going along with that, how do our fandoms
We all ship that.
I love that image so much.
Yeah, she just stuck it in, like, it didn't really have a home.
Oh,
and
yeah.
just,
We were
like,
making the slides, and we were on Google Drive, and all of a sudden, like, I kind of slipped that on there.
I just ran, you know, we're literally collaborating from our apartments, and suddenly I was like, that wasn't there.
Political RPF is beautiful, and I recommend that you read all of the Rahm Emanuel, Jon Stewart, Anderson Cooper fanfic that you can find.
Oh yeah, that brings us back to Why So Pale, Why So
Yeah.
Male. Fandom as a safe space, it's that way to retreat and to see yourself in media. So it started off online, and it became this thing where, I mean, FlameCon is a safe space for people to indulge in their fandom, and it's...
Frenchie and I were at FlameCon last year, and it was in the hotter than hell Grand Prospect Hall. I don't know how many of you were there. But immediately when we walked in, we were like, oh my god, we're among our people.
Our peoples!
To a level that I've never had at NYCC. I just honestly felt like anything could come out of my mouth. And some of the panels that I saw last year, anything, and you've seen, anything does come out of our mouths. And it was okay. There were going to be other people nodding their heads like you fine folks out there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting as I've started to like write. So I was actually really shocked. I wrote an article about fanfiction for Lena Dunham's newsletter, and I was shocked that she was like willing to publish an article about fanfiction. And I was shocked at the response I got because I'm still not really used to talking about it like out loud and like interacting with other people who write it. I'm definitely not used to like interacting with other people of color who write it. So like to have like people come out of the woodwork and they were like emailing me like, oh my god, thank you so much for talking about it. Like this is on Cosmo. Like I can't believe Cosmo was talking about fanfic. Like that is kind of amazing and still something that I'm really getting used to. Like going away from LiveJournal, away from Tumblr, and like coming into.
And talking about it in a non-derogatory way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's crazy how, because I grew up online, basically, like I was on LiveJournal, I was on AOL, all my friends were online, my first girlfriend was online, you know what I mean?
I think everybody's.
Yeah, let's be real. So I feel like, you know, starting from this place where we were all online, feeling comfortable because there was that anonymity kind of still, to now have it be part of ourselves beyond just an avatar, it's all here. It's just so cool to see how it's evolved over time.
I mean, like the way I think about it, like I'm a huge sports fan, and it's always been so weird to me that like I can be this crazy Chicago Cubs fan like in public. Like that is not an issue. Like I can walk down the street like regaled head to toe. Whereas if I decided to, you know, walk down the street dressed as Angelica Schuyler or like dressed as Doctor Who or something, like people would really have an issue. And like sports fandom is just so much more normalized.
What's crazy, like I'm a huge hockey fan, but there's a webcomic out there.
Check, please.
Yeah. So it's satisfying all these things for me that I didn't think could be satisfying.
Yeah.
So it's just, yeah, it's awesome.
But there's like, in terms of the safe space that like places like FlameCon provide, when you go to a regular con, they're a safe place for geeks, right? But when you come to someplace like FlameCon, it's a safe place to be completely out.
As that may mean for you.
Yeah, like I mean, especially when you're like a triple threat. When you're like a woman, you're queer, and you know you're a person of color. It's really hard to find a place that's completely accepting it, even in a place like Comic-Con, because oh, you're a woman, you shouldn't do this. Oh, you're brown, you shouldn't do this. So you know, and here I don't have to worry about that. So FlameCon basically is a fanfic. Like this is our safe space. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna open the floor to questions now, and nobody collected the papers, right?
Almost got them, although, does anybody still have their index cards? There's a couple more out there.
Okay, so, question? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Have a giant.
You've been ready, man.
Already. So actually, just talking about Jack, please. You were also, I believe you were talking about the live interaction of fans versus the source material.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about Jack, please, and the online Twitters as well as online Tumblr for this online comic? If people don't know what Check Please is, I'm happy to tell you.
Yeah, please do.
Yes. So yeah, it is a online webcomic. You can go to omgcheckplease.tumblr.com and read the entire thing with the Twitter-inspired questions and comics that are actually part of the canon. So it's about an adorable little queer Southern boy who goes up to college in Massachusetts and becomes part of a hockey team. And so it actually becomes canon queer relationship with one of his teammates on the hockey team. And it explores different dynamics within the fact that the main character, Eric Biddle, nicknamed Biddy, actually is setting his comic up as a YouTube video documenting his experiences in college. So it's a very fun thing to read, and it's also really interesting with the live interaction between the writer of the comic and the fans. So would you like to talk about that?
I personally have not read it.
We are actually just discovering it because
Hi.
One of our
You're one of our-
contributors wrote a piece for us about it.
Yeah,
And I saw hockey and was like,
and my God, we did not know the thirst that was out there.
Oh yeah.
Because that thing went viral, and the Twitter, the back and forth conversations about the piece even, it was amazing. I love that it's kind of growing in that way, because I think that's really unique so far. I think it's going to be the way that things grow going forward. But that kind of fan community influencing, and you can see it in the comic, it's amazing.
It's like
I want that to be the way
the fandom they're actually becoming part of the creation itself, which I find fascinating. And
Yeah, I think it's based that way. Like,
Mhm.
if that's what the source material starts out as, and like it's supposed to be interactive, that makes sense to me. It's more when it comes like afterwards, and then it starts altering the story. That
no one's done that before though.
yeah, no, that's
So
really
that's
cool.
why, I'm gonna read it. Don't worry. We've just been busy trying to put this together for you guys.
And it's on omgchecklist.tumblr.com.
Oh please, Homegirl will be hitting me up like, why haven't you read it yet? So I'm on it.
Yes, hi. You happened to talk a bit about Omegaverse, and I'll admit I've read it, I've RP'd it, I have a friend who really loves it. But where do you see the dividing line between Omegaverse is something you could write, but when does it become transphobic in the subject of like MPreg and stuff? Because as an AFAB androgynous person, I sort of look at it as, well, you could be writing MPreg with trans guys or AFAB non-binary people, but instead you just really seem fixated on having a penis involved, even if it doesn't work.
Okay. No, I totally get that. I've actually read some that. Well, have you read Starrett?
I generally avoid Starrett. I didn't see it when I saw the show personally,
No, and
so I didn't
it's
get into
totally
it.
understandable. It's a bit of a cesspool. So I throw no shade at your avoidance.
As someone who used to be in the supernatural fandom, I understand.
But I've read actually a couple of really good. I can't remember them off the top of my head. Probably somewhere buried in my millions of bookmarks. But there've actually been a lot of really good both ace and trans pieces that have been written in the Stark fandom. They're kind of hard to find. You do have to do a lot of digging, but they are there. And one of the things I also like about Omegaverse is that if you read the right pieces, the AOB is or ABO is not gender specific. It's a separate thing. So you can have someone who's cisgender or trans, and they would still be categorized either an alpha, beta, or omega. And like I said, it's a five-sign science. So whoever writes it can make conception happen any way that they feel that works out. And you're suspending belief when you read it anyway. So. Yeah, I mean, I've read a couple good pieces, but they've only been in the Starrett fandom, and I totally get where you would say that a lot of it comes off as transphobic, because a lot of it does.
Yeah,
So,
I roleplay on Tumblr, and I see ABO all the time, and I'm like, I personally RP as a transgender version of the DCEU Lex Luthor.
Okay.
So I'm just kind of sitting there going like, my character has the appropriate gear to be getting himself knocked up, and the emotional issues that it would probably happen at some point, but nobody seems interested. Whereas I see sometimes on my dash, though this is more in the X-Men fandom than anywhere else, there's just this ton of ABO stuff happening, and I'm like, this seems suspect to me. I mean, I'm right here. I
guess it's like also who's writing it.
Yeah.
This is like not like, and this is not necessarily Omegaverse, but like when I'm writing again, back to Women's World. When I'm writing fanfic in that and it's like explicit, I'm normally writing Angela and Sean, and I'm writing Angela and Sean because like I'm basically like fulfilling pleasure via another black woman like with this hot dude. And so it's definitely like it's kind of, if you're writing it from a fantastical perspective and like from a wish fulfillment perspective, again, you're kind of more likely, I guess, to write what you know. And so all of the fan fiction that I write pretty much has black women if it's going to be sexual, because that's what I'm looking for and like that's what I want. So that may also like have, not to justify the transphobia of it, but that may have something to do with like why so much of it is forgetting.
Male thing,
Mhm.
like, I think that part of the reason Omegaverse is the way it is, for me, what little I've encountered with it, is because for so long, like, the idea of a transgender headcanon, you couldn't really talk about it.
Right.
And so I guess Omegaverse, I know a lot of genderqueer people who write Omegaverse because that's the acceptable way to show that desire for that particular kink, because it tends to be breeding kink. And I just think that we as a fandom, like I've seen maybe, and I'm showing my age here, I'm in the X-Men fandom, and I've been in the X-Men fandom since 2011, which means I saw the whole rise of Cherrick. God, save me, please. I'm unnecessarily bitter about it because I ship literally the third most popular ship in the X-Men fandom, Alex Darwin, but it's got maybe 250 fics to the 10,000 that are Cherrick based, so I get a little frustrated sometimes. But I've been through the entire kink meme, both kink memes, twice, and I've seen maybe a grand total of 3 fics about trans men that involved MPreg, and it was like, oh, well, there's several pages right before this that's just ABO. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it has to do with also the age group of those who are writing.
Yeah, true.
They actually, they're still a bit murky even on genders in general.
Yeah.
So throwing Omegaverse into the mix is a bit, yeah.
And I would say it's about putting yourself into the narrative, just like you're doing. I'm sorry, I can't see.
So we're giving up stuff.
We have two
Yeah.
t-shirts, can we pull that? They're kicking us out, so just
Is there anybody else who needs to give us cards?
Thanks guys for sitting
Yes,
through
thank you. We hope you enjoyed it.
Piper T.